A manipulator does not need your whole life story to read you. Sometimes they only need one nervous answer, one over-explanation, one moment where you try too hard to prove you are a good person. That is why the test feels so small at first. They ask a casual question like, "Are you always this quiet?" They push a tiny boundary. They make a harmless comment. But they are not listening for the truth. They are listening for something they can use against you later. And the mistake is answering the question before you notice the test. They are testing if you can be guilted, rushed, or forced to defend a decision that never needed an explanation. And once they see the leak, they know where to press later. So today, I am going to give you 3 sentences that cut off the test before it gets access. Not because the words are magic, because each sentence creates what I call a data blackout. A data blackout means you stop giving them something they can use against you later. No emotional data, no guilt data, no explanation. Data, gray rock, is for when you are already stuck in the pattern. The data blackout is for before the pattern gets access. The first rule of a data blackout: you never explain that you are doing it. Because the second you explain why you are not giving data, you are giving data again. The first sentence is for the test disguised as a small favor. Sentence 1. That doesn't work for me. This is for the moment when someone asks for something small, but the pressure around it feels bigger than the request. Can you just do this one thing for me? Why are you making it such a big deal? I thought you were more flexible than that. On the surface, it looks like a favor, but the real test is whether you feel guilty for having a boundary. They are checking for guilt data, so you say no. Then you immediately start explaining. I'm sorry, I just have a lot going on. That sounds polite. But to a manipulator, it is a map. Now they know guilt works. Now they know your boundary needs emotional explanation to stand. That is why the sentence is simple. That doesn't work for me. That is it. That doesn't work for me. The power is not in sounding tough. It is in sounding boring. You are not giving them a debate. You are giving them a dead end. And if they push again, do not add a second explanation. Let the sentence sit. That silence feels uncomfortable because polite people are trained to fill silence with proof. But the silence is part of the blackout. A normal question respects a normal answer. A test keeps pushing after you answer. You do not need to diagnose someone to protect your boundary. You only need to notice what the pressure is doing. Sentence 1 does not prove you are strong. It proves you are not available for guilt pressure. And here is the question to think about. What small favor or casual question made you feel guilty for saying no? Because that is usually where the test starts. But guilt is only the first door. The second test is harder because it makes polite people feel rude. Sentence 2. I'm not discussing that. This is for the moment when someone reaches into a personal area they have not earned access to. Why are you so private? Why don't you trust people? You seem like someone who has been hurt before. Not every question is a trap, but timing matters. A normal person accepts that some information is private. A manipulator treats your privacy like a locked door they are offended by. That is the test. They are checking whether you can be made to open the private file. This is emotional data. What topics make you uncomfortable? What history can be used later? And most people leak here because they do not want to seem cold. So they start proving. No, it's not that I don't trust people. It's just that in the past, and now, the file is open. The manipulator did not earn trust. They triggered explanation. That is why the second sentence is, I'm not discussing that. This one feels rude at first, especially if you were trained to keep people comfortable. That is why it works. It breaks the habit of rewarding invasive questions. You are not being rude. You are making yourself unavailable for a diagnostic you did not consent to. You are saying, this topic is not available. And the most important part is what you do not add after it. Do not say, I'm not discussing that because I have trauma. That may be true, but in the wrong hands, it becomes material. In healthy conflict, explanation can build clarity. In manipulation, explanation becomes material. If sentence 1 stops guilt, sentence 2 stops the scan. And once they cannot get your private information, they may try something louder. They attack your character and wait for you to defend it. That is where sentence 3 comes in. Sentence 3, you can think what you want. This is for the accusation trap. The moment they stop asking and start labeling, "You're being so selfish lately. You're so defensive. You clearly have trust issues. You always make things difficult." That kind of statement is designed to make you reach for the courtroom. You want to prove you are reasonable, kind, and fair, so you start listing evidence. "I'm not selfish. I did this for you, and I helped you with that." But defending is the leak. Because now they know the label worked. Now they know your reputation can be used as a handle. That is why the third sentence is, "You can think what you want." It is not a performance. It is the moment you stop trying to control their opinion of you. Say it flat, say it calm, no smirk, no extra speech. You can think what you want. That does not mean their opinion is true. It means their opinion no longer controls the conversation. In healthy conflict, two people are trying to understand each other. In a manipulation test, one person is trying to make you defend your right to have a boundary. That is not repair, that is extraction. And you do not have to attend every trial someone creates in their own head. Sentence 1 protects the boundary. Sentence 2 protects the private file. Sentence 3 protects your reputation from becoming a courtroom. 3 different leaks, 3 different blackouts. You are not trying to win the conversation. You are stopping the test. Because the harder you try to win with someone collecting reactions, the more reactions you give them. That is why the third sentence has finality. It lets the accusation fall to the floor. Most people catch the insult and try to polish it. You are going to step over it and keep walking. But these sentences only work if you survive the second test. The moment they pressure you to explain the sentence itself. After, "That doesn't work for me," they may say, "Why not?" After, "I'm not discussing that," they may say, "Why are you being so cold?" After, "You can think what you want," they may say, "So you're not going to explain yourself?" That is the second layer test. They are testing whether the boundary can survive pressure. And this is where the master rule matters. Never explain the blackout. The rule is simple. The shield only works if you stop explaining the shield. If you say, "I'm not trying to be rude, I just don't feel comfortable because," the lights come back on. If you say, "I don't want you to think I'm a bad person," you just told them the exact thought you are afraid of. A data blackout only works if the blackout stays dark. The power is not in the sentence. The power is in what you refuse to add after it. This is not about being cold. It is about being unreadable to the wrong person. And this is where protection becomes strategy. You are not just spotting pressure anymore. You decide what pressure is allowed to learn. Detection shows you the test. Strategy decides what you feed it. So when they push after the sentence, you do not need a new speech. Repeat the sentence calmly, or exit the conversation. No new defense, no emotional argument, no courtroom speech. If someone respects your answer, that tells you one thing. If someone punishes your answer and demands more access, that tells you something else. You do not need to diagnose them. You do not need to label them. You only need to notice the pattern. A normal question respects a normal answer. A test keeps pushing after you answer. So remember the 3 sentences. "That doesn't work for me. That blocks guilt data. I'm not discussing that. That blocks emotional data. You can think what you want. That blocks explanation data." And the master rule, never explain the blackout. Because the second you explain why you are not giving data, you are giving data again. Now that you have the shield, watch how the test starts. If you can see the first test early, you do not have to fight the second one late. That is why the next video is the first test psychopaths use before they target you. It shows you the scan before it becomes pressure. But there is one more thing most people miss. When they cannot get data from your words, they start looking for the micro leak, the nervous tilt of your head, the way you check your phone to escape the silence, the nervous laugh that says, "Please don't be upset." They are reading your discomfort as a yes, even when your mouth says no. Send this to someone who keeps explaining themselves to the wrong person, not because they need another warning, because they may need the exact sentence before the next test happens. And remember this, the goal is not to become colder. The goal is to stop giving unsafe people a map. See you in the next pragmatic brief.